Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor are some of the best Star Wars games we've ever received, not only because BD is the most adorable droid ever, sorry Chopper, but because of how they enrich the Star Wars canon while just being a bloody good time to play. Today we're going to put these two bangers into the boxing ring and decide, is the sequel better than the original? So how this versus format works is we've got 5 critical elements of these games and we're going to compare them head to head, and then I'll pick a winner for each category, and then whoever wins the most categories is the winner. Let me know your winner down below and what you thought of Jedi Survivor. Let's start off with technical design. Now, we probably don't need to go super deep into this, but you may have heard, if you've been on the internet in the past week and a half, that Jedi Survivor has really struggled out the gate in terms of performance and design. Now, let's talk about just that performance first, right? So I'm playing on PC, and I think I'm in one of the rare camps where my performance hasn't been absolutely unplayable. Like, it's still playable, but you get so many frame rate drops and weird stuttering like throughout just all the time. Like, I've managed to complete the game with that stuttering and performance issues, so it's not like completely unplayable, but it's not great. And in terms of bugs, I haven't really had heaps, except randomly like the cloth physics will like completely freak out. This happens on whether it be on Cal or enemies or whatever, but that's like the only real critical bug that I've had. It is really just that performance issue. Jedi Survivor is definitely a looker though. Like, the planets that you go to, mainly Kovo and Jeddah, are absolutely stunning to look at. I really enjoy the like vistas that you get to see when you like come into a new area and you see like the stuff in the distance. It's like that step out moment. It's like my favorite thing in games, but you know, there's a good couple of those in Jedi Survivor. Really love those moments. Everything in Survivor looks good despite those performance issues. Jedi Fallen Order, however, being a last gen title as well, actually launched really well. Now, I played Jedi Fallen Order on PS4 at launch, or the PS4 Pro, and had like 0 performance issues. And I did do a little bit of research on its initial PC launch, which does seem to have been relatively successful, especially compared to Jedi Survivor. Now, graphically, I think Jedi Fallen Order still looks great. Like, surprisingly, considering it is a last gen game, and even back when it came out, I thought it did look really well, especially planets like Kashyyyk, and there's great variety in terms of the landscapes you get to see in Jedi Fallen Order, and they all look really solid, and the performance here is obviously better. Bugs wise, it's super hard to remember like bugs from how many years ago, but I don't think there was any like critical ones that I experienced that I can remember. Your experience may have varied, but in the technical design category, I think it like has to go to Jedi Fallen Order, right? Like, performance is the massive key here. Performance for Jedi Fallen Order was so much better. Jedi Survivor's PC performance is absolutely horrible. All right, moving on to story. Let's do Jedi Fallen Order first because it makes sense. Jedi Fallen Order takes place 5 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, with a young Padawan, now scrapper, named Cal Kestis, as he gets discovered hiding on Braca and thrust back into the world of the Jedi after being rescued by Seer and Grease. Cal helps Seer search for a holocron containing the names of Force-sensitive kids to keep it out of the hands of the Empire, while reconnecting with the Force and dealing with his trauma past. That's basically the general story setup for Jedi Fallen Order, and I just like wrote that off the cuff. And I think what's actually really solid about that is how simple it is to describe what's happening in the story, while it's still having really solid stakes in terms of having to find that holocron and trying to get away from the Empire and everything that happened in Cal's past, and trying to reconnect with the Force as he learns his new abilities, or old abilities back, I guess, and tries to, you know, become the Jedi that he was supposed to be. That setup and that hero journey that Cal goes on in Jedi Fallen Order is really good. I also like the tight cast that we have in Fallen Order, being really just the Mantis crew and Merrin a little bit later on, but having that sort of tightness to the cast where all the characters have moments to breathe and they all have really unique and interesting and funny dialogue moments here and there. I really enjoyed those aspects of Fallen Order. Jedi Survivor takes place 5 years after Jedi Fallen Order, and we pick up with Cal on a mission for Saw Gerrera, which, side note, literally never gets mentioned again. Like, Cal just stops working for Saw and no one ever mentions it. Anyway. After the mission goes sideways, Cal takes off to reunite with the old Mantis crew, only to find remnants of High Republic era tech that could lead him and his friends to a safe new world hidden behind the nebula. I am going to be very vague with my story thoughts on Jedi Survivor because I don't want to spoil anything for you, because I think that there is a lot here to really enjoy that you should kind of experience on your own, especially the twists and turns that the story does take. From general impressions of having finished the game, I really love how they have expanded on the lore of the canon Star Wars with the High Republic stuff that's in this game, while keeping true to what's, happening in terms of where the actual main narrative or the Skywalker saga is here, without adding more like stuff to like the main canon for like characters that we know, if you know what I'm being super vague here. Like, okay, but you know how every Star Wars thing takes place in the Skywalker saga, and we always want to see characters that we've seen before, but it just introduces new things that don't always necessarily line up with things that we have seen before. I like how this game avoided basically all of that and told a really interesting story, completely void of things that we have seen before, and planets and characters and all that sort of stuff that, we sort of know of. And I like that they've introduced new characters for, Cal to interact with and to play around with, even though there is some, returning planets like Jeddah and stuff. But I've enjoyed that aspect because it felt like something new, right? Like something we haven't seen before without changing things that we already know of. And I really like that aspect of the game. I also think Cal's journey here is extremely solid and makes logical sense for what has happened to him in his past and where things have gone. Really enjoyed his journey himself and where the story does take his actual character development. In terms of who wins this category, it is Jedi Survivor. For those reasons specifically about where Cal's story goes, as well as expanding on the lore of Star Wars with the High Republic stuff, and also, with the Mantis crew and what happens with them. Really enjoyed that expansion on the characters that we came to know in Fallen Order, and then also on the lore of Star Wars. I thoroughly enjoyed learning more about that because it felt new, right? Like with basically everything in Star Wars, it's like, oh, it's a Jedi and he's got a lightsaber, but I felt like we were learning new things about the Star Wars canon in this game, and that's what I really liked. Let's talk about combat. We'll start with Jedi Fallen Order. So both of these games really are Souls-likes, or maybe Souls-lite, I would say. I wouldn't say like they're light Souls games, really. Now, Jedi Fallen Order is a really good first take on that sort of a system. So you've only got the two stances really, being the single and the double-bladed lightsabers. Both feel really similar in terms of their playstyle. It's really just the different animations you get between switching between the two different stances. One is more AoE focused, one is more single target focused, and that flexibility is definitely welcome and does add some complexity to the combat. The downside here though is most of the encounters revolve around the same enemies, whether it be the Empire or the few creatures that are in the game on the different planets. There is also some of the Dathomir brothers as well, but there is enough substance and complexity to the combat to keep you engaged throughout the story. And while if you want to do that exploring and take on some of the harder challenges, like at the end when you've got, the different bounties, that sort of thing. Ultimately here though, I wouldn't say it's a very deep combat experience. And when we talk about progression a little bit, that really comes into play as well because of those skills and the way that you level up and sort of progress your character, that you do learn new skills and things, but it feels like there's only one real path, and it's just learning that path as you sort of go along. Jedi Survivor, conversely, is much better in this category. So even, we'll talk about the progression stuff in a little bit, but you've got the 5 stances and all the uniqueness in there, but even just the encounter design here, I felt was much better designed. The use of verticality in some of those environments where you've got, say, people shooting at you from a different level, and then plus the confusion skill here, which makes such a huge change to combat in my opinion, because you can confuse enemies so then they're on your side, and how that interacts with, say, these larger encounters that you get in Jedi Survival. You've got tons of enemies and you're trying to deal with that. I felt that they did a much better job in adding challenge and pacing out those encounters with those new enemy types, especially with the introduction of like the Clone Wars era battle droids. Like that adds such a huge variety to the different combat and the way that they play out. And then the Magma Guards and all these different droids and stuff that they've added. They've all got unique attacks and animations, and you can cut off certain limbs, which affects the way that they attack you after that point. Really enjoyed that sort of stuff. And we haven't even talked about companions. So in Jedi Survivor, there's a couple of companions that will join you occasionally throughout your journey, and you can command them a little bit. Very similar to God of War Ragnarok in that regard, how you've got a companion sort of with you for those moments. Definitely reminded me of that game in more ways than one, which we're probably going to touch on a bit later as well. But the winner for combat is absolutely Jedi Survivor. That's, no question there. Let's move on to world design, and we're going to start with Jedi Survivor. Now, in Jedi Survivor, there are 6 planets to explore, and I would say 2 of them are really explorable. You've got 2 others that are sort of kind of explorable, and then you've got 2 others that are like extremely linear, like story focused planets. The different variety in the landscapes and the planets in Jedi Survivor I think is pretty limited. You've really got Jeddah, the desert planet. You've got Kobo, which is kind of your foresty sort of design. You've got Coruscant, which is that big capital city. The Shattered Moon, and then the other, I'm not going to name their names, but the other linear planets are eerily similar in terms of their structure and design, especially the linear planets that they're story focused. You don't really spend a whole lot of time there. Now, as you explore across all of the world, and even in Jedi Fallen Order, there's that Metroidvania aspect where you're constantly getting new tools to perform platforming and parkour, like puzzling things. And a big issue that I think Jedi Survivor has is that there are too many gadgets and tools for traversal. Constantly throughout the experience, you're unlocking a new way to traverse. This starts with just like getting the cable at the very beginning, and then not only do you get an upgrade to the cable, you get 4 upgrades to BD, and then you get 3 yourself, I'm thinking off the top of my head. Maybe that's wrong, but what this lends to is the further you get into the game, these parkour and like puzzling things just get so complex. And something that I really struggled with is, where exactly am I supposed to go, and what exactly am I supposed to do? Like, which one of these, just a myriad of different tools that I have, am I supposed to use here, and how do I use it, and how does that interact? And that's obviously part of the puzzle, but I felt that some of these were just too complex, as they were trying too hard to use all of these different tools at Cal's disposal, where these could be easily simplified. And I don't think there needed to be that many different tools and tool sets. Like, we included all of the ones from Jedi Fallen Order, which we'll talk about in that game. In this one, like the wall jump and double jump, etc. And then you've added all these new tools. If we get a sequel on top of Jedi Survivor, are we going to add even more tools? Like, the parkouring is already too complex for me. I think there's too many things here, and despite the fact that Cal feels so much better to control in these parkour moments, there is too many of these. And sometimes, even if you know exactly what you have to do, there's a weird sort of connection where Cal just like won't do the thing he's supposed to do, whether it's like connecting onto something or jumping off something, and you just like, it's like, I know what I'm supposed to do, just like do the thing, Cal. And like a couple of times I've died just because he won't connect with the object he's supposed to connect with, because he's just like so free in the environment, which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. Outside of that though, a third of the game takes place on Kobo, which isn't necessarily bad, but it is Star Wars. It's not Kobo and it's Moon Wars. Let me see the stars, man. Like, Jeddah and Kobo are both really great planets, and they're really the only 2 planets that you can do a substantial amount of exploration on. Now, there is some exploration on other planets, don't get me wrong, but they are the main 2 planets that you'll spend that time exploring, and especially Kobo, like you constantly return there throughout the story. And sort of by maybe halfway through the story or a little bit further, I was a little bit fatigued of Kobo. Like, I feel like I'd seen enough of it, and I really wanted to go somewhere new and exciting, but I felt like we were constantly going to Jeddah and then back to Kobo, or going to the moon and then back to Kobo, going here and then back to the Kobo, and it would just felt like I really would have liked to go somewhere else. In Jedi Fallen Order, you've got 7 planets, but only 5 of them are fully explorable, and none of them are as big as Kobo in Jedi Survivor, but you've got 5 of them that you can sort of explore, and they're all vastly different. Now, the parkour puzzles here are still annoying, but I didn't find them as annoying. The big downside though is that Cal feels like he's wearing lead boots, like constantly. He's so heavy to control and move. Like, when you jump and move, it's like you're supposed to be like a light, Jedi, and you can use your Jedi jump and whatever, but he just feels so heavy. I'm glad that they fixed that in Jedi Survivor, but that's the only real downside to the parkouring in Fallen Order, in my experience, is not only, you do all the climbing and everything, and you get those different tools like the double jump and being able to wall ride, that sort of a thing, but because there are less tools for yourself and BD in Jedi Fallen Order, I didn't find these as annoying. They are still definitely a little bit annoying. I feel like both of these games rely too much on their Uncharted sort of climbing breaks in between combat, where you're just sort of climbing around and jumping around. Just, it's nice to have those breaks into combat, but sometimes I feel like it relies too heavily on that. And that is a criticism for both of the games. But the positive for Jedi Fallen Order here is that there are more worlds to explore and more variety in those planets, from the red of Dathomir or the frozen of Ilium or Kashyyyk, the big forest planet, and then Zepho and Bogana. Lots of variety in those different planets, which I found enjoyable, and I felt like that was something that we didn't get enough of in Jedi Survivor. This is a tough category. Now, in my notes here, I've got Jedi Fallen Order wins, and I think that is true. Like, I think I like the balance between the new planets being new planets we've never seen before, plus familiar planets like Kashyyyk and Dathomir and Ilum in Jedi Fallen Order, more than I liked the planets and the different world structures in Jedi Survivor. But Jedi Survivor did do some really interesting things that I quite liked, like expanding on that exploration and the freedom, especially adding, the rumors and the bounties and the side quests, especially like having those moments where you can go off and do something else, which was completely not a thing in Jedi Fallen Order. Those are really, really good. I kind of go back and forth on this one. I'm going to stick with what I put in my notes, and I'm going to say it's Jedi Fallen Order. But there is some really good stuff in Jedi Survivor, despite how much I dislike the platforming and parkouring in that game and the lack of diversity in terms of its planets. There's a lot of good stuff in Jedi Survivor, don't get me wrong. We've got one category to go, and if you're keeping score, we've got Jedi Fallen Order on 2, and we've got Jedi Survivor on 2. Our final category is progression. Now, progression, starting with Jedi Fallen Order, touched on this in combat, but the skill system here is the mainly and the only real progression system, and it is good, but it's very light. Like, you are progressing through the skill tree, you will essentially pick every single skill. There isn't really any choice here other than you may choose to pick X skill first compared to Y skill, but there's no complexity in terms of build variety. You're going to pick up all of the skills, you're only going to use that single and double bladed, and that's kind of the whole system. The other part of this as well is that progression of exploration and finding those chests and finding different things out in the world. In chests throughout the world, you just find, cosmetics, like you find a sick poncho or a different skin for BD and the Mantis, and that's fine. And I think that progression element is just enough there, right? It is a souls-lite, in Jedi Fallen Order. You've got just enough of that combat system, skill system in terms of your skill points and where you lose those skill points when you die, and then leveling up to get those different skills and actually how that expands your arsenal in combat. There is just enough of that there, plus the exploration of like your cosmetics, but I would absolutely like more of that stuff. Like, I feel like that was just enough in Jedi Fallen Order to surpass as like being a Souls-like, whereas in Jedi Survivor, you've not only got 5 different stances, like fully fleshed out stances that you can level individually, you've also got perks, which are fantastic, little buffs and bonuses that you can put onto your kit, and then there is that real build variety here. You can only have 2 of those 5 stances active, and those stances are so varied. Like, I did a video specifically on how varied those stances were, because they are entirely unique, and I feel like you're actually making a legitimate decision around which one you're going to use, why you're going to use it, and in what scenario, and then also how you want to spend those skill points that you earn, because you need to spend them in those individual trees to level up those actual stances and learn more about those lightsaber stances. Really enjoyed that whole system, that the way Respawn have expanded on what was very light in Jedi Fallen Order, and then really made it much more of a deep, complex system in Jedi Survivor. The one thing that still bugs me here is chests. Now, the customization in Jedi Survivor is significantly better, right? Like, they've really taken that criticism of how kind of weak that was in Jedi Fallen Order and made it so much better. But it is so weird to me that I open a chest and Cal gets a mustache or like a goatee. Like, I don't understand. How does that work logically? Like, Cal opens the chest and he's like, damn, I just grew a beard. Like, I guess the Force works in mysterious ways. I don't really understand how that works, but it's great to have that customization, right? Don't get me wrong. I like that we can change his hair and his facial hair, and especially all the different outfits and the way you can change BD, and the lightsaber customization is super advanced now. I love the changes they made to the lightsaber customization, plus the blaster customization, all that stuff. Fantastic. Absolutely dig it. And that's why Jedi Survivor wins this category. So the final verdict here is that Jedi Fallen Order is one of the best examples to me of a game that's not trying to do too much. It's telling a great story, although it is short. It's got a core set of characters that's fantastic, without expanding that character list too much. There is some exploration, but the chest rewards all contain just like basic standard cosmetics, and they're all just reskins. There is a small skill tree progression system, but there's enough of a sense of progression here that you feel like you're actually moving through the world. All those elements wrapped into one turn into a game that is quite a solid first attempt at something like this from Respawn, and I really commend what Jedi Fallen Order was trying to do and what it actually became. Jedi Survivor is bigger in every single way. Like, Jedi Survivor took everything from Jedi Fallen Order and just pumped it up to 11. And I think the one thing they didn't pump up to 11 personally is that world design, and really keeping with the couple of planets that they really had developed and didn't expand too much in terms of that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Jedi Survivor reminds me a lot of what God of War Ragnarok did for God of War 2018. It took literally everything from the first game, the entire combat system, movement mechanics, everything like that, and then refined them, made them deeper, added more exploration exploration and progression and build variety and new weapons or here it would be the lightsaber stances, but it took everything from that first game, really honored it and progressed it and felt like a true sequel. Something that a lot of games do is that they try to reinvent themselves for like every sequel, whereas God of War Ragnarok took everything, made it better, and I feel like Jedi Survivor absolutely does that here. And it is a fantastic game, albeit the PC performance issues, that I highly recommend both of these titles for any Star Wars or Souls-like fan. There is a great time to be had, but Jedi Survivor is obviously our winner here.
Like Jedi Survivors?
Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. This is the second of these versus format videos we have done, and your feedback is hugely important. So let me know in the comments what you think of this video and anything that we can do to improve this format. Thank you guys for watching this till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.